you can pass on responsibility, but you can't pass on accountability. This goes for anybody, whether it be a business or government official. If you are the one that is in charge, you can designate someone to take care of that, but you're ultimately accountable for that.
Welcome back to Building Nebraska. We'll ignite your passion for entrepreneurship while highlighting those who turn ideas into reality. Building Nebraska is brought to you by the Engler Agribusiness Entrepreneurship Program at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Today, we are in Mitchell, Nebraska, exploring a unique business in the Nebraska Panhandle. I am joined by Andrew Wells with Brown Sheep Company. Andrew, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So this is a very unique, multi-generational business. Lay the foundation. How did Brown Sheep Company come to be, and what's the origin story there?
Yes, so Brown Sheep Company has been around for 40 plus years. My grandfather, Harlan Brown, and his wife, Janet, started this business right as okay, let me back up. Before that, he raised sheep and farmed on the same place that the mill sits currently. And at that time, the packing plant in Scottsbluff closed, and so he was taking all of his fat lambs to Texas, and he was turning about 60, and instead of kind of retiring and slowing down, he sped up. And at that time, to kind of back up even further, this idea kind of got in his head when he was my mom asked for a spinning wheel for Christmas, and she was in college at this point, and the spinning wheel had to stay home with him. And he always loved to make things and be in production, and that kind of kept the wheel spinning, and that idea got formed. And at that time, the textile market in the United States, or at least the manufacturing textiles, was kind of slowly dying. There was a lot of businesses on the eastern seaboard that used to spin yarn, and they started closing. And he went back east and kind of bought a whole bunch of used equipment, came back here, and about 9 months later, he had his first skein of yarn. So, and then at that point, he loaded his trailer, or his Buick up full of yarn, and went started making a tour. He made a trip through Wyoming, and most people kind of laughed at him, thinking that wool yarn should not be made in western Nebraska. And there's some good reasons for that. Wool needs a lot of humidity to spin correctly, and those things. And then he went down to the Four Corners region of the Navajo Nation and went to his first trading post. And I still remember him telling me they all came out and they bought all his yarn, and then he left and came back and did it again. So he was kind of the very first guy to be our first salesman.
Very cool. Well, I'd love to know more about establishing yourself in the marketplace. Obviously, going door to door or visiting with the Navajo Nation was a key pivotal moment there, but how did you expand beyond that and establish yourself in this space, especially where you're located here in western Nebraska?
Yes, to clarify, Brown Sheep Company makes wool yarn for knitting and crocheting, mostly hobbyist. We do some custom work for manufacturing, but that's where it kind of started, was the small independent local yarn shops. There's a couple across the state. Always like to throw out some. There is in North Platte, Nebraska, there is one called the Prairie Hand Knits. There's ones in Omaha and Lincoln, Imagine Knits, and all of those. So people like that is who we market to. Wool and yarn is a tactile experience, and we believe that yarn needs to be handled for it to be sold. And so that is where it kind of where our marketing kind of comes from, and why we believe it's an experience to buy yarn and not just something. It's just not just a transaction.
Most definitely. Well, there's a pretty robust process that it takes to produce high quality yarn. What do your day-to-day operations look like, and how do you land on this product that we're sitting in front of?
Yeah. So my current day-to-day operations is, I help manage the production in the mill. I help manage the quality control. So every time our yarn is going to be spun or dyed, it needs to be tested. So when we run a set or a load of our most popular yarn is like lamb's pride worsted. That yarn is first, the machine is set up with the gears that is needed to have the right weight and twist. Then a sample is going to be run, and then that sample is going to be tested multiple times for, like I said, the weight per yard and also the twist rate. And we have books going back 15, 20 years of what was spun beforehand. So all that is being tested with what has been made in the past. The same thing goes with our colors. We have hundreds and hundreds of different colors, and every time we run a dye lot, that's what it's called when one color is being dyed, a sample is taken and then dried and then compared to 20, 30 years of that color being dyed.
Well, obviously every business has its challenges, but of course, given the extreme amount of equipment that you have to deal with on a daily basis, and obviously where you're located regionally, what are some specific challenges that you face in your business today?
Where to start? Yes, there is. As you mentioned, most of our equipment comes from foreign countries. France, Germany, Italy are all some to be mentioned. And in dealing with different countries and different businesses in different countries, one is the time zones, and trying to get responses back for inquiries is hard. You have to be up early and send out messages because they're going to bed when we're going to work. The other hard challenges anymore is finding people who want to work. That is our jobs here are not glorious jobs at all. There are a lot of, they're not hard jobs, but they are definitely, attention to detail is important, and being very persistent and have always asking the question why, coming back to what is going wrong in our production, and going back a few steps.
Well, certainly in agriculture, we're no stranger to multi-generational family businesses. This is obviously a unique approach to that, but what was it like for you to come back and establish your role in the business, and is this something you always knew you wanted to do?
Yes, a little back history about where we came from. I was born in Fort Collins, Colorado, and when I was 8 or 9, my parents came back to come and help my grandfather. And I knew at that point I always loved being here as a young kid. So I went off to college. That was a requirement from my parents that I attended college, and I went to the University of Wyoming and was ready to jump back right into the family business. The romanticized idea in your head about what it is like to join a family business and what it's really like are two different things. Learning to work with your parents takes a lot of grace and tact in how you present problems. The nice thing about working with family is they're your family, and they will always they'll never leave you. So I have always appreciated that. I've learned so much I've been back at the business for 10 years now, and I've learned so much from both my mother in the design of yarn and what it takes to sell yarn and what knitters like, and from my dad, who came from a scientific background as a researcher, and the stick-to-itiveness, the attention to detail, and the troubleshooting that it takes to run equipment that you don't have technical support all the time for.
Certainly. Well, in the last 10 years since you have been back, what are some ideas that you've brought to the table that you've implemented, and what has that looked like?
It's hard to say that I have had very many bright ideas. Yarn in itself is very ageless. And I married a knitter herself that loves colors and yarn. So she has definitely brought more to the table when it comes to the design of yarn and the colors. What I've kind of, the challenges like I've mentioned in the past that I've kind of had to deal with is the learning this place. As you just saw, as we went through our quick tour, there's a lot to here. And there's a lot of things that I didn't know, and I'm glad I've had 10 years or more to learn it.
Certainly. Well, as you mentioned, yarn is sort of an ageless product, but I'm sure you've had to adapt and change your marketing strategies in marketing this product to the public. What does your frontward-facing marketing strategy look like, and how do you carry that out?
Yeah, that's the evolution of yarn stores has been, because that's our target market for the most part, has been kind of eye-opening even since I've been back. We used to have 2,000 plus yarn store accounts that would buy from us, and now we're down to less than 1,000. And that's not necessarily because we're doing a bad job. It's because of the market or the marketplace for yarn. Unfortunately, a lot of yarn has gone to sell online, and it's that has definitely had to change our marketing strategy. We have implemented our own online website for to sell to individuals as we are as that's kind of change. So that actually took place. We didn't plan this, but right as COVID hit, our online website started, which really helped us out and kept our yarns in the hands of knitters.
So as your target demographic seems to change a little bit, and the people who are actually using this yarn, if I go out on a limb, I am a knitter myself, but I have very few friends that are my age that necessarily have that same interest. How are you trying to appeal to younger knitters and younger textile enthusiasts, if I may?
That's a very tough question.
It's a loaded question.
It is a loaded question. We are, of course, trying to show, to sell yarn, you have to have patterns for people to use our yarn. So as I'm a guy, so I don't understand fashion very well at all. I wear the same pants that I wear 10 years ago. But as most of our market is definitely women who are knitting sweaters or scarves and things like that. So we have an online blog we call it a mystery knit along. So currently we are running a I don't know if it's a mystery at this point, but it's a sweater kits that are appealing more to the younger generation. I hate using the terms frumpy, but a lot of the patterns from 20, 30 years ago would be called frumpy in most people's minds. So trying to change that, the fashion in there. I sound weird talking about fashion.
No, that's awesome. Well, as a beginning knitter myself, I'm going to have to look into those resources because it can be a bit overwhelming when you're trying to figure out what kinds of yarn you need, what size of needles you need. So I think that's all very helpful from my perspective, at least. So as you look towards the next few years, what are some goals you have for Brown Sheep Company, and what do you hope to see happen in the future?
Yeah, I would love to see our market share within the crafting yarn continue to grow, and I would like to see us appeal more to the younger generation. Most of our customers are definitely, like you were alluding to, are on the older side, and so our yarn is definitely not the flashy yarn. There's yarn, if you walk into a yarn store, that might be $30, $40 a skein for one skein of yarn. Our yarn is not that way. I have always kind of categorized our yarn as, in the knitting world, knitters have what they call a yarn stash. And they normally have boxes and boxes, or they have shelves full of yarn. And our yarn, I would always like to consider us to be kind of the base of the base yarn, stuff that kind of fills in the cracks. And we're not the expensive yarn. Our yarn goes for $15 a skein versus some of the ones that are $20, $30, $40 a skein.
Well, much of the listening audience that will be taking in this episode has an interest in entrepreneurship in the state of Nebraska. What advice would you give someone who is looking to start an unconventional business in a rural Nebraska community? Research before you would ever start. Look at your market, look at your demographics, make sure that there is a market there, and then also make sure you're committed to it, because as you own your own business, kind of the buck stops with you. You can't look towards anybody else to get things done. They always one of the principles I learned was that you can pass on responsibility, but you can't pass on accountability. And in this goes for anybody, whether it be a business or government official. If you are the one that is in charge, you can designate someone to take care of that, but you're ultimately accountable for that. Certainly. Well, I want to close out on a fun note, as I feel like when you look at knitting through a traditional lens, you think of your grandma knitting a scarf or a sweater. But what are some other projects that you have seen users of your yarns create, and what's really possible when it comes to that space? Okay.
I'm going to kind of diverge because I love this story that I'm about to tell. Like I mentioned, I met my wife over 11 years ago here at the mill, as she was a knitter, and she came through here with her mom she just wanted a tour, and we exchanged. I had a name tag, so she looked me up on Facebook of all places, and we started dating. She lived in Lincoln, Nebraska, and I lived in Laramie, Wyoming. And during that, I was a poor college student, and I didn't know what to get her for Christmas. And so I knew I had lots of yarn, as the videos can probably be showing you right now. So I filled my a couple bags full of yarn and started knitting her an Afghan. And that was her Christmas present. So as a guy, when it comes to knitting, you can always use knitting as a way to impress a lady friend that you might be excited about.
Oh, awesome. Well, if you take nothing else away from this episode, if you're looking for love, knit an Afghan. That's what we've learned.
Yes.
Well, Andrew, thank you so much for your time today. And it's been a pleasure to learn more about Brown Sheep Company. And I'm excited to do some shopping after we finish recording.
Thank you very much, Rebel.
Well, thank you so much for tuning in to Building Nebraska. Once again, Building Nebraska is powered by the Angler Agribusiness Entrepreneurship Program at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. We'll catch you next time.